Pranam, let's just wait for 2 minutes and begin. Okay, let's begin. Namo Orientanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Hayaryanam, Namo Vajjayanam, Namo Loe Savva Sahunam, Eso Panchanamukkaro Savva Pava Pranasano, Mangalanam Cha Savvesim Padamam Avai Mangalam. Namo Durvara Ragadi Vairivara Nivarine, Arhati Yoginathaya Mahaviraya Taine, Pannage Cha Surendre Cha Kaushike Pada Sansprashi, Nirvishesha Manaskaya, Shri Veera Swamine Namah. Today we begin with the fifth and the last sutra of Sri Panchasutra, authored by some Chirantanacharya, some Purvacharya Bhagwant, the teak on which is written by Shriman Haribhadra Sureshwarji Maharaja. Starting from the first sutra, where we saw Pap Pratighat and Gun Bijadhan, destroying the root of all evil, the root of all sin, and sowing the seed of guns to, having the seed grow into a tree and then yield its fruit, and then the person who sowed the seed actually tastes the fruit of this, the fruit, the seed of which he had sowed a long time ago. Now this long time could be one birth, or it could be a journey that spans several births. The dharma beach that is spoken about in the sutra is the beach of all virtues that are conducive to dharma, and all the qualities that are essential to understanding dharma. This so the sowing of these seeds of dharma is mentioned in further detail in the Granth Vyug Drashti Samuchaya and also in other various other granths. We can have a look when we refer there, when we refer to these granths at a later point in time. So, for instance, as a mention of doing namaskar to Janeshwar Paramatma, doing pranam to Janeshwar Paramatma, doing Vayavach, having Shuddh Ashay, taking various abhigrahas, uh, writing, having the scriptures written down, worshipping the scriptures, donating scriptures to sadhu, sadhji, bhagwans, etc. All of these are mentioned as dharma bij, the preliminary seeds of dharma in Yog Drashti Samuchaya. And in Panchasutra, we have seen how you don't only have to, it's not a one-time thing that you vow. You put these seeds and you leave them to grow, just like you would in case of actual seeds and actual crop. You have to tend to them from time to time. You have to water them. You have to nourish them, ensure that there's no weeds growing around. The same with the various abhigrahas, the various vrats and niyams that we take as shravaks and later as sadhu bhagwats. Now, this fifth sutra, the name of this fifth sutra is Pravrajya Phal Sutra. the name very simply conveys that the sutra is going to express what the fruit of pravrajya, what the fruit of diksha is. There can only be one tatvik fruit of diksha, and to attain this fruit, there is in Jain Tattvagyan only one route, which is diksha. So this is the direct relation that both have with each other. And this phal, this fruit that is being spoken about, is the attainment of Paramatma Dasha, attaining Siddhavastha. The Tikakar Bhagwant, in the very beginning, explains this. He says, Idanim Panchama Sutra Vyakhya Prakamyate. We now begin to write a commentary on the fifth sutra. Tikakar Bhagwants do a fabulous job at connecting, showing the connecting link between various sutras. And this is not only for this granth, but in various granths. Here, the link between the fourth and the fifth sutra is, established only in one line. He says that uh, the relation between between the fourth and the fifth sutra is as follows. The fourth sutra mentioned the charya or the conduct of a dikshit. Here, the supreme fruit of this charya, of this conduct of sadhu bhagwans is shown. And so the first sutra begins. स एवमभिसिद्धे परमबंभे मंगलालये जन्म जरा मरण रहिए पहिणा सुहे अणुबंध सत्ति वज्जिए संपत्त नियरुवे अकिरिये सहावसंठिये अनंत नाणे अनंत दंसणे. The Sutrakar Bhagwan says that in this manner, that Dikshit who has attained a parambara of sukh from one birth to the other, and from that birth to the next, his sukh keeps on increasing gradually. So this Dikshit, he ultimately attains siddhi. What is the siddhi like? He says that this siddhi is described as param brahma, the supreme brahma, the supreme sukh of the atma, because all of his virtues have reached a peak. He becomes the most auspicious abode that there is, his own atma. There is no janma, there is no old age, there is no death, and there is nothing ashubh in his atma pradesh. There is no capacity within his atma anymore which can generate an anubandh, and we say anubandh means parampara, any parampara of ashubh. And this is why this atma has attained its own swarup. It is now free of all kriya such as going and coming, eating, sleeping, drinking, etc. It is now stable in its own swabhav, and thus it is endowed with Anant Gyan and Anant Darshan. One might wonder here, why is Anant Charitra not mentioned? So, in context of the Siddhas, Anant Charitra is in the form of being stable, in the form of being established in one's own virtues. That itself is Anant Charitra. And then this Sarup is further described. Sena Sadde, na Ruve, na Gandhe, na Rasena Fase. The Jeeves of Siddha Bhagwans, they do not have any shabd, that is, they do not emit any sound. They do not have any roop. There is no tangible appearance. There is no smell. There is no taste. There is no touch. So these Siddha Bhagwans do not have any of the five senses or the functions that are discharged by the five senses, nor can they be perceived by our five senses. And so, to a person who is accustomed to, imagining existence as something that comes with these five senses, one might wonder that, does that mean that, you simply disappear from existence? And in discussing this, the uh, Granthkar Bhagwant is examining the Buddhist belief wherein when you attain nirvana, you simply disappear from existence. There is no trace of you left in this world. So the Tikakar Bhagwan clarifies this further. He says, so if this is the case, does becoming Siddh mean that that you stop existing? And then he gives an answer saying that this is not the case. even though there is no shabd, no ras, gan, sparsh, etc., this does not mean that Siddha Bhagwan's uh, becoming Siddh means, not being present, that is being absent from existence. He then says that becoming Siddh is to be present but without having any roop. Being present while having a rupee power, power that cannot be perceived by senses, but there is still infinite power. Although this power of the Siddha Bhagwans, which is in fact one with the soul, is free from any appearance, Siddha Bhagwans naturally have infinite virya, that is infinite power. They are krutarth, that means that there is nothing left for them to do. They have done everything that had to be done. They are free from all sort of suffering, be it dravya or bhav, which means be it external suffering or internal suffering brought about by one's own feelings. There is no capacity left within them to generate any sort of expectation, and thus they have become sarvatha nirapeksh. They have become completely free from all apekshas, because of which, and there's a very very nice comparison done here. Just like an ocean, when you look at it at a first glance, it's very stable and it's very deep. Siddha Bhagwans have attained a sort of gambhira, and that is why in Logos also we say Sagaravara Gambhira. Siddha Bhagwans have attained a gambhirya, sense of sobriety, a sense of tranquility that is so deep, and the end of which we will never be able to ascertain, because there is no apeksha left within them. So this is further highlighted in the next sutra, wherein the Granthkar Bhagwan says, Asanjogiye esanande o cheva pare may. The Granthkar Bhagwan says that this Sukh of Siddha Bhagwans is free of all sayog. So the word sayog, right? Yog, as we saw earlier, means connection, except here it's not the spiritual connection that we spoke about the last time. And sayog is a prefixing word, which essentially does not alter the meaning. So the Granthkar Bhagwan says that because there is no apeksha here, their sukh is the best in the entire world. Uh, the Tikakar Bhagwan explains this beautifully, and this is really the essence of what we keep on hearing in all Vyakhyans. Get rid of expectation, get rid of, do not expect someone to do something. If you do, it's the person who has expectations that'll be unhappy. And this is not something that in fact that you only hear on Vyakhyans, but you also hear this everywhere. You hear life coaches talk about it, you hear motivational speakers talk about it, but the way that they look at it is surely very limited. And you know their advocacy for getting rid of expectations is also ultimately to further a larger expectation. Say, they're teaching us not to expect something from XYZ people. No, this could be one's significant other, it could be one's family, it could be one's friends, it could be in context of, fulfilling a larger expectation. Here, the Tikakar Bhagwant is unequivocal in clarifying the Jain position on this. He says that apeksha is not sukhrup. Expectation can never, take the form of happiness, because expectations always come with a certain suffering, and this suffering is in the form of, eagerness to quench that expectation. He further says that every sayog, every attachment with something, now this could be tangible or otherwise, uh, every sayog is the cause of vyog. Vyog is, basically falling apart from that particular person or thing, disconnecting, detachment. Not detachment as a state of mind, but literal detachment, the person separating or the thing separating from you. And here, in saying this, a defining quality of sayog is, put forth. The Tikakar Bhagwan says that which is in the nature of, separating is known as sayog, which is to say that everything that comes together is ultimately going to fall apart, which is further to say that once you attain something, it is surely going to go away from you, as long as it is not part of yourself, obviously. And so the natural question that would arise to, someone who's new to this path and someone who's curious, uh, is that, oh, if this is the case, why do we see the majority of the world, you know acting in one direction, and you're asking us to go in a completely different direction? Why is the entire world chasing comforts that are that are in fulfillment of their expectations, and here you're asking us to get rid of expectation altogether? So the Tikakar Bhagwan says that those atmas, those jeev who are deluded by moha, they like the fruit of expectation, which is suffering. What is the reason of this? He says that it is moha that causes jeeves to see that which is not there, which is why Arihant Paramatma has described moha as the greatest enemy. And to specify this, uh, another verse from the Agam is quoted, wherein it is said, "An annadato ripu anno parinam neva vijay itto sakiriyatiye annatha vistato suha." There is no other, there's no greater enemy than ignorance, than moha. It is ignorance or moha that causes all wrong activities, and it is these wrong activities being activities in fulfillment of our expectations, that give us dukh from all four sides. On the other hand, the sukh that Siddha Bhagavans enjoy is one that is free of all sayog, free of all apeksha. Now, when we say free of all sayog, one question that the Tikakar Bhagwant is asked by one of his shishyas is, okay, you say that he's free of all connection, tangible or otherwise. Then, answer this question for me. We know that Siddha Bhagwants, they they're stagnated, they're in one fixed place, one yojan above the Siddhashila. And because they're there because they're part of this world, because they're part of this universe, and they're very much still in existence, they also need a space to be, right? And those of us who've studied the six dravyas, namely, Jivastikaya, Pudgal, Pudgalastikaya, Dharmastikaya, Dharmastikaya, Akash, Akashastikaya, and Kal, will know that Akashastikaya is one of the six, fundamental uh, dravyas in this world. And the job of Akashastikaya is to offer space. So, for any entity, living or non living, to exist, Akashastikaya is absolutely essential. Because if you need space to be, right? So, Siddha Bhagwan similarly also needs space because their Atma, their Atma is still part of a universe. So, the Tikakar Bhagwan, is asked, you say that that Siddha Bhagwans are in a state where they do not have any sort of connection, they do not have any sort of sayog, there is no sort of dependence. In that case, aren't Siddha Bhagwans relying on Akash? Aren't they taking the help, or isn't Akash Astikaya as a dravya, as a fundamental in this world, offering them space to be in? And in saying that, is there, aren't they also bound by some sort of sayog, if not the other sorts? So there are two answers to this. And here we delve into Anekantvad. Uh, do remember this fifth sutra has a lot of discussions in terms of what Siddhabhavans exactly are like, what other faiths talk about nirvana or moksha, and and towards the end there are some beautiful subtopics as well. It could get a little dreary at some point of time. So if you'd like me to pause or slow down, or perhaps try to clarify something, then please flag it, and please stop me if uh, I sound like gibberish to you. So now the Nishchay answer to this is that Just like one dravya does not become another dravya, a living thing cannot become a non-living thing, and a non-living thing cannot become a living thing. Similarly, Siddha Bhagwans are there simply because of their own nature, and not because of some external support, or because they are in connection with some external or some other dravya. Vyavhar Rai opens otherwise. Vyavhar Rai says that one thing can be in close touch or in connection with with another thing, and it can continue to exist. But there are two types of sayog. One sort of sayog is that which is with viog, that is, that a sort of connection that is bound to break. And there is another category of sayog, another category of connections, which is not in actual terms of, which has nothing to do with attachment of uh, person A with that thing or person, but simply in terms of a spatial connection. That is, you're offering, say, a Muni Bhagwans, right? When they stay in our Vasti, when they stay in our homes or in our Upashras or in our Paushachalas, a Muni Bhagwant might have, physical connection, as in they're physically present in that space. But if we are to analyze if whether or not they have a connection in terms of, a sayog that is that has the element of attachment with that particular property, with that particular space, the answer is always going to be no, because munis are free of attachment towards all forms of dravya, kshetra, kal, and bhav. Now, uh, this interestingly reminds me of, and I'm going to tangent here. When we talk of Mahatmas being free of dravya, kshetra, kal, and bhav, and we see examples of all these four, dravya, kshetra, kal, and bhav, in terms of Mahavir Sami Bhagwan in the Kalpa Sutra. Uh, in terms of Kal, for instance, Bhagwan is described as, not having any sort of preference, inclination, or attachment for day and night, for the summer or winter or for the rainy season. In terms of Kshetra, they have no attachment towards this country or that. In terms of Bhav, they have no preference or attachment towards Raga and Dvesh, and so on. A Muni Bhagwant has exactly this example to follow, and to the best of their abilities, while there is Tartamta, which is variation in, the detachment that one Muni has vis-a-vis another, there is going to be a substantial degree of detachment, or at least that is what they're supposed to strive for. Interestingly, uh, in the current circumstances of our nation, of our country, our state, etc., a lot of Mahatmas, and especially now when in Maharashtra elections were around, a lot of Mahatmas were advocating for, say, voting for a particular party, or choosing, having a certain political opinion, to ensure that the interests of the community are safeguarded, but also that the nation is more secure, the nation, or the state for that matter, is secure from external harms, etc. Now this led to a lot of prarupnas which Mahatmas are not supposed to make in the first place. There is a beautiful and a really, really beautiful incident of Mahasati Shri Madan Rekha in the scriptures, wherein, she has a long tormented history, and ultimately, after realizing what's what, she ends up taking Diksha, and two of her sons end up becoming kings of two different kingdoms. Time passes, and they're warring with each other at one point in time. Sadhviji, Shri Madan Rekha ji, at this point is in one kingdom, and she hears that this king is fighting with the other. They do not know, the two kings do not know they're actually siblings, and they're very they're very furious, and they want to be victorious. So Madan Rekha Mahasati ji, she walks from she's walking through the battlefield from one state or one country at that point in time into another, and while she's traveling from one place to the other, she's sort of giving both her sons to say that, do you guys know who you're fighting against? It's your own brother, and look at the hinsa that you're doing. Do you know the fruit of this? And so on and so forth. And they both attain vairagya, and they both relinquish their uh, want to attain the other's kingdom. Now this might look like a, well, tiny incident, but if you look at the details of this, you hear that Madan Rekha, even though she's mother to both sons, she doesn't have attachment towards both countries, but also not she doesn't have attachment towards either of the two places. And this is exactly what Mahatmas should have. They are apratibadha, or they are free of restraints pertaining to any sort of dravya kshetra kalan bhav. And in that, having a preference for a particular state over the other is, well, not something for Mahatmas. And this also extends to the idea of a nation, because if times were favorable, and even today for certain countries such as Nepal or uh, Myanmar, where Jain temples do exist, and where Mahatmas could perhaps go without doing viradna of their Sayyam, uh, and say these India and the other nation engage in any sort of warfare, Mahatmas cannot have an opinion or a preference as to which country should win or which country should not, because they are apratibadha from all of these bhav. Right. There's a question. So, okay, so I'm referring to Naman's question. I was asked to read these questions out loud because I think the recording tool cannot see these chats. The question reads: being a rupee, how can Siddha Bhagwans occupy space? As matter is something which occupies space and has mass. Well, this is the scientific view, and by scientific, I mean the modern science view. Uh, the idea of space and the idea of Akash, as per the Jain scriptures, is very different. For instance, and this is similar to the other dravyas as well. For instance, Dharmastikai, as we know, is something that offers uh, jeeves and ajiv both a medium to travel. So if you make any movement, or if you throw a ball and that ajiv ball makes any movement, it is Dharmastika that is going to provide for movement, and it is a Dharmastika that is going to provide for uh, rest. So when my movement ceases, or when the movement of an ajiv, a non-living object, ceases, it is by virtue of a Dharmastika. And this is the exact reason that when a jeev becomes siddh, we know that the atma shoots up right to the top of the world, but it stops after one point in time, and this point of stopping is the boundary of the 14 rajloks, the top of the 14 rajloks. The jeev cannot travel farther up there, because there is no dharmastikai or adharmastikai. There is no dharmastikai beyond that point, but only akash. So while there is space, there is no medium to give it uh, to provide for its motion, and there is no medium to provide for its rest, which is why the jeev stagnates at the top of the world. So just like dharmastika and adharmastika, they are they work for jeeves, just like they work for a jeeves. It's similar for akash. Does that answer your question, Naman?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Hello.
Right. uh so
Yeah, that makes sense.
all right, thank you. So now in context of nishchana and vyavhar, we saw that nishchana, now nishchana says that, and there are various perspectives, various nais included in nishchanai too. Here it is just expressed as a general nai. It says that if a particular thing is supposed to yield a particular fruit, and that fruit is not attained by this particular thing in the present example, then, okay, let me rephrase this. If x is supposed to give y as its fruit, and I have x which does not yield y, Nishchay will say that this thing is not X. And to put this in, to put this in a philosophical context, Nishchayana will say that Samyak Darshan is that which gives Samyak Charitra. So if you haven't attained Samyak Charitra, you do not have Samyak Darshan. As simple as that. Similarly, here Nishchayana says that, Sayog is that which is supposed to have Viyog as its fruit. Any sort of connection is called Sayog when the fruit of that connection, when the result of that connection is to ultimately disintegrate. But when there is a connection which is not going to disintegrate, that connection cannot be called Sahyog in context of Siddha Bhagwans. So while there is some sort of connection between Akash and the Atma of Siddha Bhagwans, according to Nishchayana, there is no Sahyog at all. I hope this makes sense. So it is further said in the sutra that just like being engulfed in Anant Sukh, in infinite happiness, is the Sabha of Siddha Bhagwans. Similarly, going to the topmost part of the universe, of the 14 Rajlok, is also the Sabhav of Siddha Bhagwans, which is attained by way of Karmakshay. What is the Sukh of Siddha Bhagwans like? Uh, the first thing that the Sutrakar Bhagwan says is Uvama Ithana Vajjai. Uvama Ithana Vijjai. There is no upma, there is no analogy, there is no comparison that can be offered in this regard. And to substantiate this, the Tikakar Bhagwant offers, various uh, excerpts from his other granths such as Yog Bindu. And one of those shlokas is as follows: Swayam Vedyam hi tad Brahma, Kumari Stri Sukam Yatha, Ayogina Vijanati, Samyag Jatiyandhavad Ghatam. Just like, this Brahma or this Atma Sukh is something that can only be experienced, that can only be, felt by experiencing it yourself. Just like a bride, and a virgin bride does not know, the happiness of being married. Just like a person who is blind from birth cannot see objects such as, a pot or a pan, etc. Similarly, a, a person who is not a yogi, that is a person who is a yogi, cannot experience Atma Sukh. And if you go back to the previous sutra, you will know that Sadhu Bhagwans have been described as Yogi Purush, which also means that Sadhu Bhagwans experience a partial glimpse of what it must be like to, experience the Sukh of Siddha Bhagwans. Now, this also cannot be understood, cannot be experienced by us, because surely, looking at ourselves, we perhaps fall in the category of a Yogi Purush. The sum of this is that what what the sukh of being siddha must be like can only be experienced by the siddha bhagwans themselves. How do we know this? Instead of going into any other argument here, the sutrakar bhagwant offers one simple explanation, and he says this is the agnya of sarvagya janeshwar paramatma. And then and these are the little words: tatha janagya एवं स्वसंवेद्यं सिद्ध सुखमित्याप्तवादः निदर्शनमात्रं तु नवरं सिद्धसुखस्येदं वक्ष्यमाणलक्षणम्. There is a question. In reality, what can be a peak experience in this time and age? Our peak experience of happiness can be that of, well, in terms of possibilities, our peak experience can be that of the sixth and the seventh gunasthanak, which sadhu bhagwans today also do attain. So with higher and higher diksha paryayas, the longer the diksha paryay, and more importantly, the longer the vishuddhi in this diksha paryay, the greater the happiness. And this obviously, we're not excluded here. Uh, Although in a lower category, a shravak who's attained samyak darshan and who's taken the 12 vrats of a shravak and is practicing them, just like, and this process was also very nicely elaborated in the second sutra of the Panchasutra, that And the words I think that were used were Vishuddhaman Vishuddhamana Bhava. You become purer and purer as each day passes, and every day you're happier than the previous day. So the peak would be somewhere, you know, at the 6 and 7 Gunasthanaks. What it must feel like, surely those Mahatmas who experienced it only can tell. And this also will come later. Thank you, Niket. So, here the Granthkar Bhagwan simply says that this is Janagya. The Agya of Sarvagya Janeshwar Paramatma is truthful without any anekant, which means that there is ekant in, saying that the Agya of Paramatma is always truthful, because there is no rag, dvesh, or moha, and thus there is no reason for, any untruthful speech. And thus, when they say that Siddha Sukh is Swasamvedya is something that can only be experienced by your own self, their word has to be taken as apt here. And then if someone were to, still sort of ask, okay, but what's the closest that you can think about? The Granthkar Bhagwan gives a tiny, but, and this is something that we can imagine, a beautiful example. Savva Sattukhaye, Savva Vahi Vigame, Savvatha Sanjogenam, Savvicha Sampatye, Jare Samayam, Ittonanta Gunam, Tam tu Bhava Sattukha Yadito. When imagine that all your enemies have been destroyed, all your diseases have been destroyed, all your desires, all your endeavors have come to completion, all your ambitions have become fulfilled. The happiness that you experience at this hypothetical stage is on the one side, and if you place the happiness that Siddha Bhagwans enjoy on the other side, the happiness enjoyed by Siddha Bhagwans, even when you have fulfilled all your desires, etc., and all these conditions that were stated previously, the happiness of Siddha Bhagwans is still going to be infinite times greater, because Siddha Bhagwans have destroyed their Bhav Shatrus. Siddha Bhagwans have destroyed their Bhav Vyadhis, their Bhav diseases, which is the diseases in the form of various karmas. And in every other example, you prefix the word Bhav. And thus, the actual enemies have been destroyed. So the Sukh that they're enjoying is also going to be real and not, something that's fictional. And after saying all of this, he further says that just like uh, you know just like, except for a sadhu, no one can experience the sukh of a sadhu, because the sukh that a sadhu experiences is also by way of a special and a higher category of karmic shayopsham. Just like, a diseased person cannot experience the happiness that a disease free or a healthy person experiences, similarly a person who has not become siddh cannot experience the sukh of uh, jeeves who are asiddh. And then the time period of how long these Siddha Bhagavans exist is mentioned. This, I'm sure, a lot of us have studied in Nav Tattva, but for those who haven't, or, also to refresh our memory, uh, the sutra says that okay, there are four bhangas or four, so, basically there's a bifurcation of four categories here. Everyone and everything that exists in this world can be put into one of these four categories. We look at the beginning and the end, right? So there are some things with a beginning and with an end, which is sadi and sant. So is the prefix which means with. Adi is beginning, ant is end. So sadi sant, some things have a beginning and some things have an end. Things, people, whatever. There is something known as sadi anant. Some things have a beginning, but there is no end. They are anant. Some things have no beginning but have an end. That is anadi sant. And some things have no beginning and no end. That is Anadi Anant, right? So Sadi Sant, Sadi Anant, Anadi Sant, and Anadi Anant. There are four such categories. Uh, If there's any confusion with respect to these, please flag it. Uh, so, in context of one jeev, when one jeev goes to moksha, and if you look at it from his perspective alone, then his siddhatva is sadi anant, which means that there is there is a beginning to it, and the beginning is the point where he destroyed all his karma and when he went to moksha, but there is no end to it. It is an anant dasha. This dasha is never going to come to an end. But in context of siddha bhagwans generally, siddhatva can be described as anadi anant, which means that there was no point, there was no initial point when siddha bhagwans came to be, and there will obviously never be a point where they come to an end. So the difference is this, that in context of one specific jeev, if you look at, when a particular jeev attained moksha, his siddha dasha will be sadi anant. Uh, Whereas if you look at siddha bhagwans collectively or generally, their state can be described as one that has been in existence without any beginning and without an end, right? So the Granthkar Bhagwan mentions this. And now here's the part where we enter into a lot of logical discussions, back and forth. Where like the first, the Granthkar Bhagwan starts with, you know, the Tikakar one particular, he starts with debates about why do all jeeves not attain moksha at the same time, and then he progresses to discuss what the Sankhya school of thought says, what the Buddhist school of thought says, and so forth. So the first question that and before we look at the first question, if let's go back to the first sutra, wherein uh, the Granthkar Bhagwan mentions taha bhavattai bhavao, that a jeev attains moksha when tatha bhavyatva and other factors come to fruition. They all come together at the right, basically they all come together. So when all of these five factors, and we've seen these five factors on numerous occasions earlier, when they come together, that's when a jeev attains moksha. Again, to refresh this, there is uh, the swabhav of the jeev, or the swabhav of that particular thing, niyati, that is destiny, kal, which is time, purusharth, that is the person's own effort, and what am I missing here? Yeah, your previous karma. Okay, there are two questions. Amar Bhai says, I have heard happiness and sadness are temporary and illusion. My question is, if it is illusion, then Narakna Dukh and Mokshna Sukh is also an illusion, right? For example, for Sri Krishna is in Narak, but their soul won't feel pain or Dukh. Then can we conclude that we won't feel the Sukh in Moksha? Okay, so now this, uh, so firstly, with respect to Krishna Maharaja, not feeling Dukh in Narak, this is not true because, well, this is not true in terms of what actually is, which is that if when you go to Narak, be it Shrenik Maharaja, Sri Ravan, or Sri Krishna, all of these jeeves are going to experience dukh, and it's going to be severe pain, and there's no exception to that at all. We say that they do not experience dukh is because although there is dukh from the outside, these jeeves, because they are samya drashti, even while they feel excruciating pain, they treat it as something that is going to ultimately pass, and they see it as an opportunity to shed their karma, which is why it is said that even, and which is why Acharya Ramchandra Swishari Maharaj used to say all the time that sadhu ne dukh hoy, but sadhu dukhi na hoy. A sadhu can have dukh, but a sadhu cannot be dukhi. You can have a lot of suffering, a lot of problems, a lot of obstacles in your life, but you can't be said to be a sorrowful person, and that reflects your dasha, your internal state, but that does not reflect you know an absence of pain altogether. So this pain, and in cases where the sukh and dukh are described as illusional, uh, well, this is also covered in the Gandharva Vyakhyan of Paryushan, wherein one of the Gandhar Bhagwans, prior to taking Diksha, obviously, one of these Brahmins, they had a question that, oh, in our Veds it is said that all of the sansar, all of the four gatis, they are nothing but a dream. And on the other hand, you see that if you do this you'll get moksha, if you do this you'll get that. So how do we reconcile these two statements? And Bhagwan says that, look, some things are described there are three types of statements. One of them is mahima vakya. So to show the gravity of how everything in the sansar is momentary, how everything is fleeting, it is said that everything is an illusion, this entire world is a dream. But this is not to say that, and there are certain faiths that actually believe that all of this is an illusion in literal terms, not in metaphorical terms. The Jain darshan says that if you apply Anekantvad and if you look at it from the metaphorical perspective, that is the perspective that shows you the figmentary nature of things, then sure, it is acceptable. But if you literally say that there is no sansar, and more particularly for your question, there is no sukh or there is no dukh, then that is false. And this is, of course, if you look at the beginning of the Panchasutra itself, but the very opening words of Paramatma in Panchasutra is uh, that the sansar has been in place of yeah, has been in place from anadikal. Anai jivasya bhave. The jiva has been in place for for an infinite time. Anai kamma sanjoga nivattiye. The jiva has been in karma sayog from time without beginning. uh, and then he says this sayog with karma, or this sansar, is dukh roop, dukh falak, and dukhanubandhi, which could not have been possible if all of this was illusional. And thus dukh exists, sukh exists, the ways to attain sukh also exist, and the place where you attain sukh is moksha. uh, yes, Naman, you're right. The statement, the bifurcation of anadi anant, sadi sant, anadi sant, sadi anant, is with respect to vyavhar. With respect to nishchay nay, yes, but this is with respect to nishchay nay. I clarify again. Even if you look at one single atma, siddhatva is anadi anant, because in terms of satta, in terms of latent power, in terms of the inner potential, every jeev is siddh from anadi anant. Okay,
Thanks.
so we're looking at these five factors, the five samvas, the five karans, right? uh, the tikakar Bhagwant is encountered with the first question here. He's asked if bhavyatva is equal, or if every jeev has the same uh, sort of characteristic, that is bhavyatva, if every jeev has the same swabhav from within. And by swabhav, I don't mean disposition or nature in terms of one jeev being angry or one jeev being calm, but the actual material that the atmadravya is made of. uh, we're referring to disposition specifically in terms of bhavyatva. What bhavyatva is basically a marking quality of the soul. And for the longest time, uh, I had the idea that bhavyatva is something uh, that was basically a part of the jeev's own swabhav. And I meant this in absolute terms. I used to think that bhavyatva was something that is an inherent characteristic of the jeev. In partial terms, this is true, but in partial terms, it is not. And why it is not was shown to me by Acharya Bhagwans by way of this fifth sutra, and so it's stuck in my mind. Uh, a lot of us have this idea because we're accustomed to hearing, bhavya jeeves or bhavya jeeves, jati bhavya jeeves, etc. So, and we'll look at this later. Uh, Here, the Tikakar Bhagwan says that if Tatha Bhavyatva and all other, we hear that because of Tatha Bhavyatva and the other four factors not coming together, jeeves do not go to moksha at one point in time. So, and the Granthkar Bhagwan says Tatha Bhavyatva is Vichitra, which means it varies for different jeeves. Just because of this variation in Tatha Bhavyatva, in the disposition of one jeev, as against the others, the fruit that these jeeves get in terms of attaining moksha is also different. So, the Shashya argues that can it not be that every jeev has the same bhavyatva, but because of ancillary, here it's described as sahakari karan, which is basically ancillary factors. Because of ancillary factors, there is a difference in when they attain moksha. uh, Basically, X and Y are the same person, but X got opportunities first, and that's why he could progress quicker and attain moksha, and Y got them later, so maybe he attained moksha later. Isn't that the case? So here the Tikakar point says that there is that one must resort to anekantvad here, and you cannot say this in absolute terms. And he very nicely says that ekantvad is something that is tatvikvad. Anekantvad is something that is tatvikvad, because anekantvad is the only philosophy which recognizes the strengths or the powers of all different factors in their respective place. Some people will highlight purusharth, some people will highlight a factor such as grace of god, some people will highlight previous karmas or previous karmic sharupsham. Anekantvad recognizes all of them in their own right place. So, after saying this, the Tikakar Bhagavan says that no, it is not because that the Sahakari Karan or the ancillary factors are different for different jeeves, that they are attaining moksha at different times. It is because that that it is because that Tatha Bhavyatva is fundamentally different from other jeeves. Uh, to substantiate this further, he's, he says that the reason why one particular jeev is not able to gather the other ancillary factors at the same time as one jeev is because this Tatha Bhavyatva is different. Please stop me if this is a little confusing. So he basically, if you look at, if you take a certain type of mud, a certain type of earth, and that earth lacks the inherent capacity to be molded into a pot, no matter how many efforts you undertake, it will not be made into a pot at that point in time. Whereas if you look at a sort of earth which has the capacity to be molded into a fine pot, only then when you put various efforts into it can the pot be made. And as part of, now if one earth, if you just look at a specific type of earth by which you can make pots, even this particular type of earth or clay will have various subtypes. Some forms of clay you can quickly just use them and mold it into a pot. Some will take time, and all of this truly boils down to the upadan karan, that is the inherent yogyata of that particular jeev. And this yogyata is in terms of tatha bhavyatva. Well, bhavyatva and tatha bhavyatva, if you were wondering about the difference, tatha bhavyatva is that particular type of bhavyatva. तथा is वो, so उस प्रकार का भव्यत्व. Now another question that is posed by another shishya to Tikakar Shri Haribhadra Sweshwari Maharaj, as also to the Granthkar Bhagwant. He says that you say that only a sansari can become siddh, not someone else, because someone who's siddh, obviously it makes no sense to say that he became siddh. What is the rule, or what is the principle behind this? That is, what is the principle behind saying that only a person who is sansari can go to moksha? Because it could so happen that uh, you know uh, there could be a point in time where the atma was mukt, it was free, then it became sansari, and then it went to moksha. Why do you say that this badh avastha is basically the state where the atma was bound by karma? Why do you say that this badh avastha of the jeev has always been in place, from time, beginningless time? So the atma, the Granthkar Bhagavan first says that anything uh, that has a past, anything that has a past will have a beginning. This is the argument from the other side, Swami Lakadam. Just like, when a pot is made, you can point out and say, oh, look, this is where the pot, when the pot came into existence. Similarly, the Bandh Avastha of the Atma, the point where the Atma became, bound by karma, also must have a beginning. Which is why there must be one point in time where the Bandh started, and that must be the beginning point of, the Atma being bound. So this Anadi Man Bandh that you're talking about, that the Atma has, been bound by karma from Anadi Kal, this does not make sense logically. Here, the Tikakar Bhagwan says that look, Bandh is as good as your past, and your past or the past of every other thing is something that has been in place from time immemorial. Everything or everyone that you look at has a past, and everyone or everything is in the present. When the past existed, that point in the past was the present for that relevant period of time. And thus, if it came to existence in that point in time, you can say that, okay, at this point in time, it came into existence. But for every point in the past, there was karma bandh that was happening. And thus, for an infinite past, there was infinite karma bandh. And thus, the Atma has been, bound by karma from time immemorial. And he's to describe to show what the scriptures say on the past, present, and future. He cites an authority from a previous scripture, and he says that the gatha reads as follows: bhavati sa namatitah prapto yo nama vartamanatvam एष्यंच नाम स भवति यह प्राप्स्यति वर्तमानत्वम. That bhutkal is that which has uh, which had previously attained, the state of being present, and bhavishyakal is that which will attain the state of being present in the future. So uh, so if you believe that the Atma was first without any bandh, and then it became bound by karma, and it then it became free, then there will never be a concept such as moksha, because if the Atma is becoming free from karma again, what is to say that it will not become bound by karma at a later point in time? And thus there will never be something known as moksha, because moksha is freedom from all karma altogether. Right. So in and to further substantiate this, and we've discussed this example also before, he offers the classic example of gold and ore. Just like gold in itself is a pure dravya, but the ore in terms of impurities, is whenever you discover gold in a gold mine, that those impurities have always been in place, even though both are fundamentally different things. Similarly, the Atma and Karma, or the Atma and Pudgal, or Jiva and Pudgal, have are two fundamentally different things, but they have been together, which is to say that the Atma has been bound by karma from time immemorial, from Anadikal. And similarly, just like how you expose gold to fire, etc., and you refine it and you make it pure, when you expose the Atma to various, to the steps listed in the sutra, you make the Atma free of all these impurities, and you also are able to realize the Atma's Shuddha Sarup. Right? That now begin the arguments of the Sankhya Mat. The Sankhya Mat is one of the six principal Indic faiths. Uh, so the first set of arguments that are posed here are those by the Sankhya Mat, and then uh, this Granthkar Bhagavan examines the arguments that are made by the Buddhists at that point in time. Uh, this might be a bit heavy, so we'll perhaps defer it to the next session. If there are any questions relating to anything that we have discussed today, please shoot. Okay, seeing none, we'll uh, call it a night. Thanks a lot for attending. Pranam, everyone. Good night.
Pranam, thank you.